Today, we're going to prove how RFK's candidacy is actually completely in shambles and that it's basically mathematically impossible for him to win. And so let's get right into the data. So first and foremost, we do have a lot of numbers to look at, but let's just see what brought this video into conception in the first place. We saw how RFK has been shilled by niche neoliberal types, these centrist types, and they typically want this guy to win. The problem being is that, of course, they've all been hoping for that Hail Mary of when he gets on the debate stage, the vocal etch and sketch, like sort of like delivery of, I really think that Joe Biden has been, that sort of thing. Apparently, some people thought that was going to work, but apparently he won't even have a shot. And so, typically when you have a guy with a puncher's chance, you could say like, okay, there's a chance for a knockout there, but that's not even in the cards because apparently he's not meeting the criteria for even this. Now, the reason for this is explained by a myriad of different things. But first and foremost, let's get into the polling as we all understand it. So just to begin with, we have RFK polling at an aggregate amount of only 10.3%. Now, this is differentiated from where he was before. As we know, we have polls going back charted over 6 months ago, and we can see that as of Thanksgiving, that while Trump was up by 6, Kennedy was up by 16.7. And so what I mean is that Kennedy had support in the high teens nearing 20%. Now that's all the way down to 10. Now, that's bigger than any third-party candidate since Perot in 96, I believe. The thing is, though, is that, of course, that doesn't make sense because that isn't going to comport with how the election actually turns out in reality for two main reasons, okay? So one big linchpin for running this sort of type of campaign is that you're hoping to get that 15% that you normally need in the commission standing to present yourself in the debates and then win. The problem being, of course, is that RFK not only is not a good speaker, that's just me being objective. I just cannot, I cannot handle listening to him. I mean, it's just that obvious. And so beyond that, of course, most people would see it the same way. But even overlooking that fact and just looking at the material aspect of this, of course, we have a guy who is not meeting that prerequisite 15 percentage points, like I said before. And what seems to be pretty evident here is that he also needs to qualify on the ballot for 270 electoral votes in the college, so to speak, so that he can actually have a theoretical chance of winning, which is a prerequisite for actually being on the debate stage. Because, of course, if you want somebody to take airspace, you ought to be able to say, like, there's a chance of me winning, in which case right now RFK does not have that. Now, what's also interesting about this is that he's trying to get on the ballots in a lot of states. Now, the issue is that he got screwed because the timeline would have been that, by maybe September or October to be qualified in these states and have the money and the support to actually be on the debate stage. But it's pretty evident to anybody with the brain right now that Kennedy is still struggling to get these states under his control. And what the issue is, of course, is that the timeline was pushed by a couple months. And so instead of having a debate in like 4 months from now, it's in like 1. And so all of a sudden his timeline's all screwed. And that comes at the face of the fact that if he's going to meet these criteria to get on the ballot for these states that he probably won't even want to run in, he will have to actually spend more money that he doesn't have. And that's brutal. Here comes an enormous issue as well, by the way, guys. He only has enough signatures, in theory, for 201 electoral votes. So he only has got 2/3 of that. So he's going to need several more states in order to actually be on the ballot, enough to really qualify for these debates. And not only that, but he's also 5% short of the popularity contest called polling, where we're going to have him meet to actually participate. And what's worse is that he's only having enough signatures for these states. Okay, there's a whole process where you need to get petition to get someone on the ballot. You have to do that. And awfully, a lot of times when it comes to people getting these signatures to get people on the ballot, a lot of these signatures will be fraudulent. They will be forged. And when you have such cases, it'll delay the process inevitably for God knows how long. And so qualifying whatever signatures he claims to have is going to take a while longer than he's saying it will. And so when realistically you submit signatures, it ought to take maybe a week for people to just paper over, okay, these are legit. But you'll have some jagoffs that will fake signatures, which is a felony offense in a lot of cases. And guess what will happen? These candidates will get tarred and feathered over the fact that some of these signatures are going to be fraudulent. And it's going to disqualify a lot of ballots that otherwise would have been all right. And so when you look at it that way, Kennedy is looking at an uphill battle. And so that's a very horrible pitfall for him to be dealing with at the shortened timeline of participating in the debates that are, again, closer than expected. Now, when we covered Nicole Shanahan like 2 months ago, we also covered the fact that she had been married to a co-founder of Google, Sergey Brin, and that millions of dollars would help funnel into the campaign for Kennedy, which has seemingly come to fruition. So I was right again. So there was a committal of $8 million from her own personal fortune, which is her husband's, I suppose, to get ballot access. And so they're spending money not on advertising for saying RFK is a great guy or whatever. They're spending money just to get on the ballot, just to have a theoretical shot at winning, just to get on the debate stage, which they're currently not on right now. And so it's a horrible look for him. Also, given the specific criteria for the CNN debate in June, what they said is that RFK only has 2 polls from reputable pollsters since March 13th that would ostensibly be of qualification status for the debate. And so even though he's polled over 15% in different polls as of several months ago, the downtrend in the vote share for him personally has affected his candidacy insofar as they're being very stringent as to what supports what. And so if you look at a CNN poll on this CNN, you'll look right away and you'll see that there's only one CNN poll with RFK, and this was about a month ago, and it shows RFK at 16%, which is pretty good, but there's only one. And so when they're hosting the thing themselves, they're going to want to poll more times, but they're seemingly not funding that aspect of the campaign. And so now it looks really doubtful that he'll get the polling aggregate high enough to fix this. Now, keep in mind, by the way, that we're really getting into the nerd weeds, but you got to love it, okay? So when we look at this fact, okay, so you'll notice, for example, that RFK's vote share is the highest among 18 to 34-year-olds, independents, including partisan leaners and moderates. Now, what the problem is with this, of course, is that the burgeoning support of the political apparatus as we kind of consider the youth college campuses to be, these are mostly being diverted towards like the Palestinian conflict, and that's what they're passionate about, among other issues. And so for RFK to have that be his big support base is not really productive, because like 6 months ago that would have made sense, but after October 7th, it all of a sudden becomes a issue of, you know, them pontificating and protesting the war, and RFK doesn't have the best position on that. From what I understand, it's not something remarkable, which is to say, of course, that the states like Michigan and stuff like that, these swing states where he might have an impact or an impasse to cross, he seems to, you know, just not be able to cross the Rubicon, because he seemingly is not able to, for the lack of a better term, you know, trump whatever enthusiasm is going towards the Palestinian conflict for the youth and the Gen Z vote, which is what he predominates in support-wise. And so now it seems like he's falling to the wayside to other third-party candidates, which is the last thing you wanted. In fact, when we look at these presidential election results, we look at the third parties as of the last several decades, you'll notice that, again, in 2020, you got a 1% vote share for the Libertarian. You had a 1% vote share for Jill Stein, 3% for the Libertarian and Gary Johnson, etc. Ross Perot is a fluke, but basically the point being is that the third-party support that is more conventional, like the far socialist types, the Green New Deal types, the libertarian wackos, these people are raising up their clout despite RFK being in the race, even though if RFK were to have a shot in hell, he would have to have all of the support of the independents. Now, even more bad news for RFK on top of whatever I just said, you'll notice that as of last month, which is still a better result than what the polls would say today, RFK is polling right now in all demographics at only 9%. Now, that's really bad, considering, of course, that when you look at it one way, his strongest support base is independents, which lean Trump regardless of that fact. And so it looks horrible. Even beyond this, of course, Stein/West are polling at 4%. These are Democrats. These are far leftists. And so RFK, to have a shot, ought to be getting those votes. The disaffected Biden people ought to be going to RFK, who, in my opinion, is a left-of-center person, obviously, and therefore ought to get those votes over Biden, who's senile. That being said, of course, similar to worms being in your brain, RFK is suffering from a tumor called Stein and West, who, again, like I said, are at 4%. Now, 4% is really big for them, because I just showed you that Stein last election in 2016 only got 1% of the vote. And so that kind of tells you that the Green Party is pulling a lot stronger, and combined with West, which are the same person basically, are going to get basically double or triple the support that they did in 2016. And that's, again, despite the fact that RFK is on the ballot. So it's really emasculating for him to be in that position, because he could certainly need that help. Again, RFK's goal right now, if he wants to get on the debates, is to quickly get to 15% of the popular vote and enough polls to be reputable, on top of spending whatever money he does have from the Shanahan connection to actually raise enough for volunteers to get signatures for him to get on the ballot to qualify. And in all these aspects I just enumerated, he's not actually on track to do any of this. And so that's really bad. And again, so he would probably need these fourth and fifth parties to drop out and support him, but they won't, because he's too centrist for them to really do that. And so it becomes an issue where not only is he not viable, but he's also running against people that ought to be on his side, and yet that's not really happening. And so the people also that were disaffected with Trump at the time before the indictments in the primary are all coming home for Trump, especially at the case level when you have a felony conviction against Trump or an indictment that is BS and people see it for what it is. And so it becomes more and more obvious that he's probably the guy to vote for out of these people that are disaffected, that are the backbone of the RFK campaign. Now, let's look at this for a second. RFK Jr.'s vote share was the highest between November at 15%, but since New Year's has been dropping by 1% on average a month, okay? So how many months ago was that? It's May, that was November. So 6 months basically. And he's down at 9% polling, 9% polling. And in other results, he's at 10. And so you can kind of see within the margin of error that he's been losing a percent of support. A percent of support for a guy at 15 is about like 7 or 8% lost every year, every month. And so imagine how big of a deal that is, okay? For reference, if you lost 8% of your hair a month, you'd be bald really quick, okay? You'd have to consider shaving the shit off within like half a year. And so you got to really understand how bad of a percentage drop it is to go down one when you are at the race that we're in. And so moving on, if we look here, RFK Jr. again, going down, going down, going down, going down. At least with these people, it's at least plateauing, okay? So you see how bad that is. And again, he's going down with all my races, minorities, Hispanics, blacks, college educated, all of it. Again, losing vote share with independents and moderates as well. All right, so let's bring this home right now. So as we can see, there's an election map that is somewhat full, and we can also include some states that I'm really confident about going red at this point. And it goes about it in this order, okay? So this is conceivably what the election is going to come down to. Now, what's super interesting about this is that Trump, in this case, has not secured the election result yet. That being said, of course, it's the question of, will RFK play a factor into this? And the truth is he definitely will not. Now, there's an argument to be made that if the election were to be close enough, that it could sway it one way or the other. I am here to say that it would sway it towards Trump, obviously. But that being said, let's look at it one way. Here's the main reason why I think RFK is going to underperform this 10 percentage point. I think that he's going to end up on November getting maybe 4% of the vote. The reason why I say this, of course, is because think of the rationale and the mens rea behind a Trump voter, okay? You're either part of that 45-ish% of the country that actually likes the guy, in which case you're going to vote for him regardless of what the circumstances are, or you're part of that like 5 to 10% of people in November that are going to vote for him because they just hate Biden that much and they're that dissatisfied with the economy, immigration, etc., to the point where they're going to vote for Trump. The people that would vote for Kennedy, on the other hand, would understand that they need to vote for Trump if they want to fix things, but then they're still going to vote Kennedy. It doesn't really make sense. So of the people that would have voted for Kennedy theoretically, you would have needed for Biden to be a better candidate, because if Biden sucks that much, people are just going to swallow their pride and vote for Trump because they want Biden out that bad, okay? It doesn't proceed logically then, therefore, for Kennedy to have a viable candidacy past a certain level. And it seems like he's already peaked as of November. And so that's really tragic for his campaign. But let's compare it also to the most contemporary example we can get. Now, we have the 1992 candidacy of Ross Perot, who by and large was better than Kennedy. But let's look at the facts, okay? So Kennedy peaked at the high teens in polling 6 months ago. If we look at the facts here, you'll notice right off the bat, over 30 years ago, with the different demographics and whatever, that actually Ross Perot got about 18.9% of the vote in 1992. And while that 18.9% is pretty much in line with the peak of Kennedy, you'll notice right off the bat that not a single freaking state went towards Perot. And so even at the peak, Kennedy was not in position to win the race, not even for a second, and he knows that. The question is, what the hell was he thinking? I think, basically, he thought that Trump might get arrested. That's going to open up the field. The primary is going to be more difficult than it actually was. Joe Biden is senile. He'll collapse even more than he has already. Therefore, maybe a plurality victory where, RFK gets like 30-ish% of the vote and he somehow wins maybe. But the bottom line is that, Ross Perot put in about an equal amount of money, or actually more than Kennedy has. And you saw what it got him. It got him absolutely nowhere. Now, also keep in mind that this is coming at a time where Ross Perot was seen as an in-between candidate politically compared to HW and Bill Clinton, whereas today it seems more like RFK is seen more towards Biden than he is towards Trump, and Trump is the more popular candidate objectively. And so that is not a good place to typecast yourself, actually. And so it really begs the question of what the hell is he in the race for still? Now, keep in mind, Ross Perot got 19% of the vote with better funding and with a better leverage position in the situational context for the election. That being said, we do have some results as to what happened in the debates, because again, right now, RFK is not going to be in the debates, but let's see what the debates did for a third-party candidate in a similar position, okay? Ross Perot, in that first debate against Bush and Clinton, was found to have been polling at 47% saying that Perot was the winner, whereas only 30% voted Clinton and 16% voted for Bush. So think about that. He won the first debate by 17% in the polling and still only got 18.9%. But let's look even further. The second debate might have complicated things, and that's true. In fact, he only got 15% of people saying that he won the second debate. But when we contrast that to the third debate, you'll notice right off the bat that Perot actually won this one by 9%. And so overall, 2 out of 3 debates that Perot was in, he won objectively by the polls, which is to say that even despite winning 2 out of 3 debates, he only performed at 19%. So he underperformed the polling. He underperformed the spending that you would anticipate a third-party guy to actually commit to. And also that's with the help of 2 out of 3 debates being a W for him. Now, not only will Kennedy have less money, have a lower leverage, in the field, just how I explained, but also he's not going to have the debate to actually outperform the 2 candidates on an equal footing. And so he's pretty toast at this point. So just to wrap up the video, folks, we have some of these states I will commentate on. So, for example, when you look at the polling in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, it seems to me as if RFK, if he has no impact, is actually helping Trump being on the ballot. And so I think these are pretty locked in for Trump. The Sun Belt is solid. But that being said, there's a couple other states to talk about today. And I think that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. As we all know, Michigan and Wisconsin are more swayed by the Jill Stein vote and whatnot, even more so partisan-wise, detracting from Biden than is RFK. In which case, I think that would help Trump win these 2 states, obviously. And then even beyond that, with Trump leading the popular vote, there's no conceivable way that Pennsylvania will get all these black people in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia to vote Democrat like they did last time. I mean, that's pretty clear. So right now, we're looking at a 312 to 226 victory with RFK getting a whopping 0 electoral votes. Guys, comment down below all your RFK copes, RFK bros, please just let me know how you're going to spin this, because obviously if your guy is pulling at 10% out of the requisite, God knows how many popular percentage votes you're going to need to actually win, but you are far from it, guys. And so what do you think you guys are going to do? What's the cope? Are you going to go get signatures yourself for RFK? He certainly needs it. And so the question is, how do you, what is the theoretical scenario here where he wins? What's the alternate reality where he somehow wins? I just don't know where it is. He clearly is probably not going to qualify for these debates. And even if he does, personally, it's not his fault, but that vocal issue he has is just unbearable. I can't stand it. But it is what it is. Okay, so anyway, like and subscribe, and we'll see y'all on the next one. Adios.